There is a part of you that you've denied, disowned, and buried, but it never disappeared. It still whispers in your choices. It lives in your reactions, and sometimes it explodes when you least expect it. Today, you're going to meet it. But I'll be honest, you might not be ready. Let me ask you something. Why do you sabotage your own peace? Why do you lash out at the people you care about the most? Why do the same toxic patterns show up in your life again and again, even when you swear you've changed? These aren't random. They are signs, echoes of something deeper, something you haven't fully seen. Carl Jung, one of the founding fathers of modern psychology, called this the shadow. It's the hidden side of your psyche. It holds everything you've rejected about yourself. Your rage, your jealousy, your cravings, your fears, but also your brilliance, your assertiveness, your intuitive power. You see, your shadow isn't just the dark parts you're ashamed of. It's also the forgotten strengths you were told were too much. And the longer you run from it, the more it controls you from behind the scenes. But here's the hard truth. Most people say they want to heal, until they realize that healing isn't just about light and affirmations. It's about turning inward. It's about facing what you were never taught to face. And that's where most people stop. Because meeting your shadow means sitting with parts of yourself that make you uncomfortable. It means realizing that your deepest triggers aren't caused by others. They're mirrors reflecting something unhealed inside. So if you've ever felt like something is sabotaging your growth, if you've ever thought, why do I keep ending up in the same emotional loop? This video might explain why. Because you don't just have wounds, you have unconscious blueprints. Jung believed that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. So before we go further, I want to ask you, are you truly ready? Not just to watch this video, but to meet yourself, the whole self. Not just the version you show the world, but the version you've hidden, suppressed, banished. Because that part of you, it holds the key to your healing, the key to your freedom, the key to becoming who you were always meant to be. Let's get something straight right now. The shadow is not evil. It's not the monster under your bed. It's not a curse you were born with. It's not even the bad side of you. Carl Jung taught us something few people are truly ready to accept. The shadow is not where your demons live. It's where your repressed power hides. Let that sink in. Your shadow. The part of you you're most afraid to look at doesn't just contain shame, guilt, anger, or fear. It also holds your courage, your fire, your intuition, your instinct. Your raw, unfiltered life force. You know that friend who's always so nice, so accommodating, so polite, but one day out of nowhere they explode with rage over something small. Yeah, that wasn't random. That's the shadow talking. That's repressed emotion bursting through the cracks. And maybe that nice friend is you. See, the world teaches us to perform. Be agreeable, be positive, be calm. Don't be too much, don't be too loud. So what happens? We bury our frustration, we silence our needs, we deny our inner fire in exchange for approval. But here's the warning Jung left us with. What you repress doesn't disappear, it waits. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't whisper, it roars. This is why some people seem to self-sabotage out of nowhere. They ghost someone they love. They quit something that matters. They act out in ways they don't understand. It's not always because they're broken. It's often because their shadow is trying to be seen after years of being ignored. Here's something to reflect on. Is there a part of you that you've been hiding, not because it's bad, but because someone once told you it was too much? Maybe you're deeply passionate, but we're labeled dramatic. Maybe you're fiercely intuitive, but we're told you overthink everything. Maybe you're a natural leader, but we're made to feel like you're controlling. Every single one of those traits, when denied, becomes part of your shadow. And this is where it gets powerful. When you start to integrate your shadow, not suppress it, not act it out, but truly understand it, you begin to reclaim pieces of your authentic self. You stop leaking energy trying to be good for everyone. You stop abandoning yourself to maintain peace. You start showing up as someone whole, not just someone likable. Jung once said, "I'd rather be whole than good." That's not just a quote, it's a lifeline. Because goodness, when it's performative, becomes a prison. But wholeness, that's where healing begins. And it only starts when you admit, the part of me I fear might actually be the part I need. So let's pause here with a question. What's one part of you that you've been taught to suppress, but deep down you know it holds power? Think about it. Because in the next section we're going deeper. Let's talk about something we all do, whether we realize it or not. We project. Now before you say, "I don't do that," hear me out. Carl Jung had a powerful insight about the shadow that still holds up today, maybe even more than ever. He said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Let me repeat that in plain language. The things we judge most harshly in others are often the very things we haven't owned within ourselves. That's projection. It's your unconscious way of saying, "I can't deal with this in me, so I'll see it in you." Think about it. Maybe you get angry at people who are selfish. You think they only think about themselves. But what if you've spent your whole life overgiving, overcompensating, playing the hero? Because deep down you don't feel worthy unless you're needed. You're not mad at them for being selfish. You're mad because they reflect a freedom you don't allow yourself to have. And this is where it gets dangerous. When you don't face your own shadow, your unacknowledged fears, desires, wounds, you unconsciously assign those traits to the people around you. You start blaming, shaming, and resenting them. Not because of who they really are, but because of what you haven't made peace with in yourself. Here's another example. You might say, "I can't stand people who seek attention." But could it be that you were taught it's shameful to take up space, to shine, to say, "Look at me," without guilt? So now, every time you see someone who embodies what you were taught to suppress, your shadow flares up, not against them, but within you. Jung called this the mirror effect of relationships. He warned that if we don't become conscious of our projections, we won't just misunderstand others, we'll constantly be at war with reflections of our own wounds. And let's be real, this doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It shows up in friendships, in families, even at work. Ever had a boss who micromanages? You might hate it, but maybe it's reflecting your own fear of losing control. Ever been triggered by someone's confidence? Maybe you're seeing what you secretly wish you could claim for yourself. Here's where it gets even more important. Projection doesn't just damage relationships. It delays your healing, because as long as you're blaming everyone else, you never turn inward. You never ask, what is this trigger trying to teach me about myself? So Jung's warning was clear. If you don't face your shadow, you'll keep attracting people who activate it. Not because life is cruel, but because your soul is trying to get your attention. It wants you to evolve. It wants you to stop outsourcing your pain. It wants you to finally say, "Okay, Maybe it's not about them. Maybe it's about what I haven't healed yet. That moment when you stop pointing fingers and start turning mirrors into teachers, that's when everything changes. So here's a question only you can answer. What triggers you the most in other people? Now ask yourself, what does that say about something you've disowned in yourself? Don't judge the answer. Just notice it, because awareness is the first step toward integration. And when you finally reclaim those parts of yourself, you stop being controlled by your projections. You start relating to others from clarity, not from old wounds. That's the path to conscious relationships. That's the path to becoming whole. Here's something that might shake you up. The parts of yourself that you haven't faced are already running your life. Not loudly, not obviously, but subtly like a ghost pulling strings behind the curtain. Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So let's make this real. Why do some people keep falling for partners who hurt them emotionally, even physically? Why do others sabotage every opportunity the moment it starts going well? Why do we lash out, withdraw, lie, manipulate, overwork, overdrink, overspend, and then act like we don't know why? It's not because we're weak, it's because we're unaware. See, the shadow isn't just made of anger or jealousy. It's made of the meanings we attach to those things, usually in childhood, usually in pain. For example, imagine someone who grew up in a chaotic home where love came with fear, yelling, control, withdrawal, but also hugs, apologies, and I love yous afterward. That person's nervous system gets wired to associate instability with closeness. So later in life, even when they say they want peace, they unconsciously seek out chaos because it feels familiar. Because to their shadow, pain equals love. And unless that connection is brought into the light, they'll keep reenacting the same story with different people, different faces, different timelines, the same heartbreak, the same regret, over and over again. That's how your shadow controls you, not like a monster, but like a pattern you didn't know you were repeating. Let's take another example, someone who's always been told they're too much, too loud, too emotional, too opinionated, so they suppress. They silence themselves to be accepted. They become agreeable, predictable, safe. But deep inside, there's resentment brewing, and eventually it leaks out through passive aggression, through sudden bursts of anger, through self-sabotage. They don't even realize it's their shadow screaming, I still exist. You don't get to bury me forever. Jung's work reminds us that anything we suppress gains power over us. What we avoid grows stronger. What we ignore finds another way to speak. And if we don't make space for those parts to be seen, to be understood, to be healed, they will show up anyway, just in more destructive forms. So here's the wake-up call. If you've ever said, why does this always happen to me? It's time to ask a deeper question. What part of me is calling this in without me even realizing it? Because no, you're not cursed. You're not broken. You're just operating on an old emotional map, drawn by the version of you that was trying to survive. The good news, you can redraw it, but not by blaming, not by numbing, not by repeating. You redraw it by becoming conscious, by getting curious, by asking, what story am I living out, and is it still serving me? That's not an easy journey, but it's the beginning of self-liberation. So if you've ever felt like life is running you in circles, like your triggers are stronger than your will, like you keep playing the same painful roles, it's not because you're failing. It's because your shadow is asking to be seen, and the moment you see it, you can begin to change it. You've probably been told that healing is all about finding the light, that if you meditate long enough, journal hard enough, or stay positive enough, you'll be okay. But here's a truth many aren't ready to hear. Healing doesn't begin when you feel better. It begins the moment you stop running from your darkness. Carl Jung said it best: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Let that sink in, because most people try to heal by skipping steps. They want peace without pain, love without loss, clarity without chaos. But the soul doesn't work that way. It doesn't care about appearances. It cares about truth. And the truth is, there are parts of you that hurt, that ache, that scream when the room gets quiet. These aren't flaws, they're invitations. But instead of answering, most of us spend years pretending those parts don't exist. We distract ourselves with work. We numb with scrolling, shopping, drinking, performing. We wear masks to appear strong, even while something inside us is unraveling. Why? Because facing our pain feels dangerous. Because we think if we look too closely, we might break. But in reality, avoiding your shadow doesn't protect you. It keeps you stuck in cycles you don't understand. Here's an example. Let's say you've always felt like you're not enough. So you become a perfectionist. You achieve. You impress. You push yourself to the edge. But no matter how many boxes you check, it's never enough. Because underneath it all, there's a wound, a belief that unless you're perfect, you're unlovable. Now imagine stopping, not to fix yourself, but to sit with that wound, to listen to it, to ask, where did you learn this? Whose voice said this to you first? That moment, that still, honest moment, is where healing truly begins. Because healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to hide. And your shadow. It's not your enemy, it's your guide. It holds your story, the forgotten rage, the silenced fear, the buried creativity, the version of you that was told you're too much or you're not enough, and so it disappeared into the dark. But darkness isn't evil. It's where seeds grow. It's where transformation begins. And when you finally make the courageous decision to turn inward, to sit with your pain, rather than escape it, you don't just heal, you evolve. Let me be clear, this isn't easy. There will be days when you feel raw, when you want to run back to your old patterns just to feel safe again, when your ego screams, you're not ready. But you are, because every time you choose presence over avoidance, truth over comfort, compassion over shame, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was lost in the dark. And that's what integration is. Not perfection, not bliss, but wholeness. Real healing isn't about having no scars. It's about wearing your scars with reverence, knowing what they cost you and what they taught you. And in doing so, you become someone powerful, not because you conquered your shadow, but because you sat beside it and listened. So if you're waiting for the right time to heal, this is it. Not when it's easy, but when it's honest. Because the moment you stop pretending and start owning your pain, that's the moment you start to become whole. So here's the final truth. Shadow work isn't a weekend retreat. It's not a checklist. And it's definitely not something you graduate from once you've cried enough or meditated enough. Shadow work is a lifelong journey. Carl Jung called this journey individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are by integrating both your light and your darkness. Let's break that down. Most of us want to fix ourselves. We think healing means deleting all the things we don't like, our anger, our fear, our jealousy, our shame. But healing isn't subtraction, it's addition. It's realizing that all those parts you wanted to abandon actually belong. The adult who never allows themselves to feel jealous. That's often the child who was taught that jealousy is ugly or bad. So instead of examining it, they suppress it. But suppression doesn't make it disappear. It makes it louder just from the shadows. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been triggered by something small and reacted in a way that surprised even you? That's your shadow speaking. Have you ever sabotaged something good, then wondered why you did it? That's your shadow protecting you from a pain you haven't yet named. Have you ever judged someone else, only to later realize you were projecting your own fear? Yes, that's the shadow again. The truth is, maturity isn't about eliminating these reactions. It's about becoming aware of them, witnessing them, understanding where they come from. Because once you understand your shadow, you can stop obeying it. You can start having conversations with it instead of battles. You can say, I see you instead of I hate you. Let's be honest. This kind of inner work doesn't always feel good. There's no certificate, no applause, no social media highlight reel. Sometimes the progress is invisible. Like when you pause before lashing out, or when you admit I'm scared instead of pretending you're fine. Those moments, they're sacred. That's evolution. That's the real work. One of Jung's most profound ideas was this: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Read that again. Most people live on autopilot. They think they're making choices, but really, they're reenacting old wounds. Shadow work interrupts that cycle. It invites you to choose differently, not because you've become someone else, but because you've finally come home to yourself. Now here's the part nobody tells you. Your shadow never disappears. There is no version of you that's done. There is no finish line where all the pain is gone and life becomes easy. And that's okay, because the goal was never to be perfect. The goal was to be whole. And wholeness means holding space for contradictions. It means being both gentle and strong, both fearful and brave, both healing and still hurting. The people who embody true wisdom aren't the ones who've healed everything. They're the ones who've learned to walk with their shadow and still choose the light. They're the ones who can say, I have jealousy, but it doesn't own me. I feel fear, but it doesn't stop me. I carry pain, but it doesn't define me. So if you're watching this and wondering, when will I finally be free from my shadow? The answer is not someday, but today, each time you choose awareness over avoidance, each time you soften instead of defend, each time you respond with compassion instead of control. That's the work, that's the path, and it lasts a lifetime. So now, take a breath, because here's what I want you to remember. Your shadow is not your enemy. It's not the villain in your story. It's simply the part of you that has never been seen, never been understood, never been loved. Carl Jung never told us to destroy the shadow. He asked us to bring it into the light. Because when you shine light on something, it no longer has to hide. And what used to control you from the dark becomes something you can finally integrate. You see, the shadow doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to be heard. The jealousy you never speak about. It might be pointing to a wound around worthiness, the anger you suppress. It may be guarding a deep grief that was never given space to breathe. Healing doesn't start when you say, I'm fine. It starts when you whisper, "I'm finally ready to meet the parts of me I've been running from." And here's the question I want to leave you with. What's one part of you that you've kept hidden for too long? And what would happen if you met it with compassion instead of fear? Let that question echo within you. Write it down. Sit with it. Because the answer isn't just a thought, it's a doorway. A doorway into freedom. Look, I know this work is not easy. It takes courage to turn inward when the world teaches us to perform, to perfect, to pretend. But I also know this. The people who do this work, the ones who face their shadow, are the ones who stop repeating the pain. They stop passing it down. They stop living on autopilot and start living awake. Maybe you've been told that you're too intense, too emotional, too complicated. But here's the truth. You are not too much. You are simply carrying truths that were never given a name. So give them one. Give your shadow the dignity of your attention. Give your wounds the grace of your patience. And give yourself the love you always needed, but didn't know how to ask for. Because healing doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means remembering who you were before the world taught you to hide. If this message spoke to something deep inside, you don't let it fade away. Subscribe to this channel if you're on a journey of self-awareness, soul integration, and real healing. There's more truth to uncover, more light to shine. And in the comments, drop this phrase, "I choose to face my shadow." Let's remind each other that we're not alone on this path. This work, it's sacred. And the moment you said yes to it, you already began.